Hi, everyone. This is Leighton Jin. I'm the Director of Development for the American Documentary and Animation Film Festival, also known as AmDocs. We have a very special interview today. This is not necessarily for AmDocs, but it's for a special event with some of our friends here in the Coachella Valley. The film that's going to be screening on January 19th at 5 o'clock at the Mary Pickford Theater in Cathedral City is Pink Belt. It's a documentary, and right now we have the director, John McCrite, and we're going to talk a little bit about the film and talk a little about John's career. John, can you go ahead and introduce me and tell us a little bit about yourself?
So it's July 19th, and
Oh, I must have misspoke. Sorry.
I will be there, and Aparna, the subject of the documentary, will be there too. And it's interesting how it came about, like because this is going to be a benefit for the LGBTQ plus museum that is there. The actual museum is being developed, and so Craig Prater, who, many people, everybody knows in Palm Springs. You can't be in Palm Springs in the film world and not know who he is.
Got to know him
Um,
and love him too.
well, a friend, so I was working on a docu-series in Kansas City about the drag scene in Kansas City, and not the RuPaul drag scene, but the actual where people are making money in a smaller community.
Hmm.
And one of the subjects says, "Hey, I've got this friend in Palm Springs. You should talk to him about Pink Belt." And I said, "Okay." And so I talked to Craig, and he said, "Send me the movie." And I had just recut it. So he was the first person to see the new version of it. And I was scared because I knew his background. And I was like, oh my God, if he hates it, then, where do I go? And he came, I mean, right away. And he said, I love it. I love it so much. I want to put this, we're doing this fundraiser for the museum. And I would really love for you to preview this there if you wouldn't mind. And I was like, I want to, because my background, just a little bit of my background, has always been LGBTQ plus films,
Hmm.
in particular, the queer male story.
Hmm.
And my first film was Little Boy Blues, and it premiered at Outfest in Los Angeles. And it starred Malcolm Getz, who was he's done a few queer films. He did Adam and Steve. I don't know if he played Adam or Steve, but he was in that one. And uh, so I had a little bit of success with that. And from that, I was supposed to direct my first feature film, which was going to be filmed in Palm Springs. And
Oh.
it's called Gay of the Dead. And it's a zombie picture that it really is a coming of age story about a person who on their 30th birthday realizes or feels like they don't fit in to the club scene anymore. And it took place at the white party, and we were going
Oh.
to film. Yes, we were going to film at the tram. There's like a scene where they're trying to get to the tram, and they're going to try to go up to the top and see if they can escape, everything that's happening in Palm Springs. And it was a comedy, but because the Chad Allen, the actor Chad Allen, bought the rights to it, and he was going to star in it. And then in 2008, the market crashed. And so he wasn't able to do it. And so it never got made. So I have this really deep connection with Palm Springs. And in fact, when I was editing the drag queen piece,
Hmm.
my editor and I rented an Airbnb in Palm Springs because I don't know what it is, but I feel so creative when I'm in the desert, and that's where I wrote Gay of the Dead.
Hmm.
Got the idea for Gay of the Dead. That's where I edited, this last piece. So it just makes sense that come full circle. It makes sense that this is going to have its sneak preview in Palm Springs. So I'm very, very excited.
But let's talk about this film because it is a departure from what you usually did. And this, you mentioned to me earlier, this is your first documentary. Let's start this way. This film focuses on Aparna. Can you talk to me how you met her and how she inspired you to take this step in this direction in your career?
This very great question. So I was on vacation with my husband,
Hmm.
and Aparna was our tour manager. So she managed the whole tour and was also the person that took us, and this was in India. And so
Oh.
she took us to the Taj Mahal. She took us to it's called the Golden Triangle. And so you go through these cities within this Golden Triangle.
Hmm.
And one day, and this is the truth, I was sitting in the back of the bus and I was watching these kids play. And I thought to myself, my film career is going nowhere, and I'm okay with that. When I saw those kids playing, I thought I surrendered in some way. Like I had this moment where I just had a moment of surrender, and I was like, it's okay that my career is not going anywhere.
Hmm.
And all of a sudden, Aparna got on the microphone and she started telling this story. I believe it was a story about how she escaped being in an arranged marriage. And I was really fascinated by the way she told the story. And I asked her at lunch that day, I said, can my husband and I sit with you? And she's like, well, usually I don't sit with, but sure, why not? So I said, and then she said to me afterwards, she goes, you sure ask a lot of questions. And so I asked about the LGBTQ community in India and what was it like, and they had just decriminalized it.
Hmm.
So that was a big thing for India. And I said, what happens when a person, is in an arranged marriage and they're queer, like if it's a lesbian or a gay man? And she said that she told me this story, and this isn't in the film, but this was the story that got me really starting to think about her story. She said this woman was forced into an arranged marriage and she was raped by her husband on a regular basis. And the woman reached out to Aparna and eventually she committed suicide.
Hmm.
And it stuck with me. And then she told me this story about how she got out of her arranged marriage, which was really, really a funny story. And then and then she started talking about what she does, and she said she was India's 16-time national champion in women's martial arts.
Wow.
And everybody, and I'm starting to ask her questions. So that in a weird way, the documentary starts unfolding on this tour, and I'm asking her the questions now. And everybody that's on the tour is getting, basically what you see in the documentary is all the information that all of us tourists got on that particular trip. And I just remember, her telling me that there were that somebody politically was against her for so what she does with Pink Belt is she trains women in self-defense, but she teaches them their legal rights. She teaches them like safety, like internet safety, for example, because there are people that will try to trap women into conversations and then blackmail them.
Oh,
And
wow.
so, yeah, so she teaches what their legal rights are, but mainly they're known for teaching self-defense.
Hmm.
So I was really just fascinated by it. And I went to her room on our last night and I said, "Are you going to come to California for any reason?" Because I knew that she worked with this company, and she said, "Yes." And I said, well, please come visit us. If you come to LA, please come visit me and my husband. And so she did on her birthday, which is July 1st. So she just had her birthday.
Oh.
And she told me that there was a politician that was against her because she was starting to get noticed. And the politician was afraid that she was going to become more famous and maybe she would run for office or something. And so I said to her, do you have any fear of like something happening, like an assassination attempt or something? And she was like, no. She said, roaches run when you put a spotlight on them. So I loved that she said that. And then my next door neighbor is a cinematographer, and
Mhm,
I had worked on The Boy Next Door with him. And I said, Parna's in town. I would love to get all these stories that she told on the bus. I would love for her to just say them on film, just secretly, because I was worried that something may happen to her when she told me about the politician being against her. So she came over and we shot for one whole day, her just telling all the stories. And at one point in this, while she was talking, she said, and I am going to attempt to break the Guinness World Record for training the most women in a self-defense lesson so that I can get world recognition on what I'm doing in India. And we turned the camera off and I said to her, that I want to come film you. I want to come just film you doing that. I think it would be great. So she made the announcement. And so this is all very organic. It's not even intentional at this point.
mhm,
Nothing was intentional. And I brought her to my business partner and I said, Aparna wants to film, Aparna wants to attempt the Guinness World Record. Can we go to India and film her? And my business partner said, yeah, let's do it. And we designated a very small budget. And there were two camera people, John, the same guy, John Lyle, the same
mhm.
person who's the cinematographer for it. Uh, and Kyle McLean was the sound person. And there were four of us, and we traveled to India and we started following her in her day to day for a month.
Wow.
And it was fairly cheap to be in the hotel because she was a tour guide. She got a really good deal on the hotel, so she kind of booked, she was kind of our, fixer there in India. She's got us hooked up in the hotel, and that got us a bus that we could travel on, so that
Oh,
she would get on the bus with us and we would go to whatever event she was going to go to. We met her sisters. We went to, and this is the interesting thing about documentary. So, from the Bible story, that's what I called that first interview. I always call it
mhm.
the Bible story.
The
From
Genesis.
Yes, yes. And I I kind of knew the story, and so I tried to think of ways, how do we show this story that she told me without it just being a talking head? Because
Mhm,
it's in the past, and we want to get a bit of the past in there, but we
mhm,
also want to stay current with where she is. And so I wrote out these, beats, and on this day, let's try to go shoot this, or let's try to, she talks about milk. Let's try to go to a milk stand and her tell me about it,
mhm.
like why she likes milk. And so um, one day she brings this woman to the my hotel room and she goes, I want you to meet Mansi Chandra. And I was like, hello. And she said, she owns a factory and she really wants to help out. And I said, okay. And this woman wasn't even a part of, I didn't even know her until that moment.
Mhm,
And I think we had shot maybe 2 days at that point when this woman came in. And she said, I own a factory and Aparna's going to come speak to the women at the factory. Would you like to shoot? And I'm thinking production value. Yes. Yes, I want to shoot that because that'll make it look like bigger than what we are.
Right.
And so we went to the factory and we interviewed Monsi, and she was funny. She was brilliant. She just knew how to say things in a very concise way, but in a funny way. She had a funny take on everything. And we started hearing the stories of her factory workers, and that they were being raped by their own husbands on a daily basis.
Oof.
And I don't speak Hindi, so Mansi I told Monty and I had a conference and I said, this is what I would like to know, but then you can ask questions too if you hear something that's interesting. And so she did the interviews and she was very kind and supportive, and she didn't, it, I wanted to make sure that there was, that we weren't opening up some trauma of sorts. That's the biggest thing I worry about because I'm personally, I have a trauma survivor and I know how that is. And I certainly wouldn't want to, just for the sake of a film to traumatize somebody again. So Monsi was really, really good and the women trusted her. And all of a sudden, this woman on the third day becomes a main character in the movie.
Hmm.
And their friendship starts to unfold. And people say, well, are they in a relationship? And I say, I really don't, I don't know, but all I can say is whatever it is, it's one of the most beautiful relationships I've ever seen unfold,
Hmm.
as the
Right.
film goes on. And what was really interesting is the character arc of this woman just naturally, Monsi, just
Hmm.
naturally unfolded because she says, I don't like these people who run not for profits. Everybody's saying they're doing something and nobody's doing nothing. And she's really just outrageous, in the way but so honest that it's funny and disarming. And so at the very end of the film, I'm doing the last interview, and she starts crying, and you would never expect this strong. She's the second richest woman in Agra and owns the largest factory, for shoes in
Hmm.
Agra. And she really, it started to become like she was really the champion of Aparna, and they became like Thelma and Louise, became a duo trying to put on this event.
Hmm.
And at the very end, she cried and said, this past month, I didn't know how empty I was. And, it made me want to do something nice and, in the world. And you directly got to see how Aparna changed this person's life. And it's, and, you could never ask for that. I didn't know that that was going to happen. And I
Hmm.
saw one of your interviews with another filmmaker, and you were talking about that, how like you kind of have to pivot, you
Right.
know, and
Right.
kind of,
Especially in this kind of job, with I was a journalist and being a filmmaker, this is kind of a journalism. I consider journalism task, and you have to be prepared for whatever news or information you have, and it sounds like that's what happened with you. It's just fascinating. It's those beautiful blessings that you get, unexpected blessings you get in making a film.
yes. And it's really scary because you go in, you have a little bit of an idea of
Hmm.
what's going, like we knew we were going to the World Record event. So
Hmm.
that was, it's on this day. And then each day, each week we would say, okay, Aparna, what's your schedule? Where are you going? And then we would get in the bus and we would follow, and we didn't know what was going to happen. And you're really trusting the universe to write the story. And I mean, what greater storyteller is there than the universe? You just have to have trust in it.
What do you learn about yourself? Because you're a different kind of filmmaker. I think that's safe to say. What do you learn about yourself, and what do you learn about the whole process of making films with this project? Because it's so different. Well, I don't know, so different, but it is different from what you've done in the past. Can you talk about what you learned and the growth that you faced in doing something like this?
That's a really good question. I would say there's a safety net that you sort of have when you're doing narrative. You know where you're shooting, you know what you're shooting, you've been in the space, you get to rehearse it. If it doesn't go right, you get to do it again and again and again until you get it the way you like it. And this one is like it's like doing live theater, you're doing it without a safety net. There's a shot where so in the movie she goes to break the Guinness World Record and she does not know by the time she gets there to the stadium everything that can go wrong does go wrong. She finds out
Sounds
that
typical.
yes, she, she finds out that all the young women that are supposed to attend have finals that day, and so
Oh.
she doesn't know if people are going to show up. So this is the what I learned is when you're learning things in real time and it's being captured, and the camera crew has to be there because you don't get a second shot with it. If she discovers something and the camera shakes or is not there, we've lost that moment. And so there's an immediacy about documentary that is different than narrative. And this movie is a roller coaster because of that. Like, we learn things on camera. I learned so much on camera that I didn't know. And she reveals a secret to her sisters that she hadn't told anybody before on film. And I'm sitting there watching it, and it was her choice. Because I didn't know, that she was going to do that. But this scene that I was going to tell you about, we had one chance, and the camera guy, I said, you've got the moving the camera. It was a movie, and he was a gimbal, and he was going to follow her up on the stairs. I had seen the Bohemian Rhapsody, the Queen, and they had that scene where they follow Freddie Mercury out on stage, and I said, I don't care if she gets the world record or not, or if the girls show up or not. I just want to follow her up onto the stage and see it from her point of view. And so this young man, Anuj was his name, from India, he had the camera and he's walking up, and 1,000 things could go wrong. He could have tripped because this was a very high, set of stairs. And it's one of the most beautiful shots in the whole movie. And it's, to me as a filmmaker, it was breathtaking as he turns the corner to see whether she did it or not. And it's one of the best. Like, I get goosebumps to this day. You know how you watch a film a
I have
bazillion
goosebumps listening to you talk about it.
so it's just things like that that's what I learned, is the beauty of spontaneity and
Mhm,
having a crew that is on.
mhm,
And you have to really trust your crew, because it's out there's so much. The life lesson I learned from this is trust in something bigger than myself. When I'm working on a project, I get weepy thinking about this, but when I'm working on something, there are so many things out of my control when it comes to documentary, as opposed to, and even in narrative, someone doesn't show up, or like you lose this place to shoot, they don't
mhm,
they don't want you to shoot there. That can happen, but it's a day-to-day thing on a documentary. You just don't know what you're going, and so you learn trust. And um Haley Watson was the other camera person too, by the way. I didn't mention her at the beginning, and she was terrific.
mhm.
She worked on an Oscar-winning film just shortly after Pink Belt,
Oh,
and
which film was
she
that?
it's the one about the basketball player, and it's a short film. And I cannot. She was the one that kind of came up with the idea for it, actually, and
Oh,
pitched it, and then she shot on it,
oh.
and she's an amazing cinematographer. John Lyle is the main cinematographer for Pink
Mhm,
Belt. But the other thing I learned, which was really interesting, is that if you have a small crew like we did, and you
mhm,
start hanging out with the subjects,
mhm,
they don't see you as a crew anymore. They see you as family. And
mhm,
so they start to open up, and they start to forget they're on camera.
mhm,
And there's one scene in the movie where the crew, the four of us, we had a code word, and for the love of, I cannot think of what it was, but it was something like, 64, something like, whatever it was. And we would keep the camera rolling, but they would think that it was cut,
mhm,
just to see what was going to happen. And we shot this whole scene where the two main characters are talking on the couch, and they did this whole scene, and then they said, when are we going to shoot? And we had shot the whole thing. And it's truly one of the most beautiful scenes in the whole movie, because
mhm,
she gets really honest. The Monsi says, you really have to start telling people the things that happened to you.
mhm,
And I think that's what later on inspires her to tell her sisters what happened to her, when
Mm.
she was a young girl, and what inspired her. You find out the real reason why she started Pink Belt. And
Now, I'm sorry, I didn't
oh
mean to
no, go
cut you.
ahead.
You're just talking about that. That is a big revelation. I mean, I don't know what it is. I'll find it when I watch the film on July 19th.
Yes.
But I think you might have seen the other interviews that I've asked a lot of our filmmakers is trust, because the subject always has to trust you, and when they trust you, then they really open up. Can you talk to me about that process of creating the trust? I think you talked about a little bit, just the crew being together the whole time, and they get to know you, and then they start to open up. But there's also that element of trust, because sometimes you meet with someone for a while, but they still don't trust you. What do you do, or what happened to make it an atmosphere where she could open up and share these very intimate moments with you and on camera?
That is that is the question. That's the question. You know, what started her and our trust, one of the first things she told me when we were on the tour with her. See, I had that advantage. I actually did a tour of India with her.
Hmm.
So she got to know me as a friend. But she told me that her mother died of cancer,
Hmm.
and it was recent for her. It was
Yeah.
less than 2 years at that point, and my mother had died of cancer. And so immediately we bonded over grief. And in the movie, her mother is a main character in the film, even though she's not there. And it makes me weepy just talking about it now. I don't know what did you do? You're kind of like Barbara Walters. You're getting me to like get emotional. Um, um, but I think having that bonding moment where we started sharing with each other, I think I had to share with her about me so that she could open up and trust. And there was another, I don't want to give it away, but I shared with something that happened to me when I was young that is similar to something that happened to her. This is a really interesting. So I started off as an actor, right?
Hmm.
And this was when I was in my 20s. And the way I used to find the character as an actor was I didn't look at what our differences were. I looked at the things that connected us.
Hmm.
And this film, I approached it very similarly. Like, for example, when she was a little girl, she, the only way that she could be, do karate, they didn't have karate for girls back then. So she cut her hair and she
Hmm.
passed as a boy.
No.
And she wanted to play with kites, which her brothers told her only boys can play with kites, not girls. She wanted to play with marbles. She was told only boys can play with marbles. Well, I had the similar thing. I wanted, an easy bake oven. What's wrong with wanting to eat cake? Like
Right.
who says that's gender? But back then, when I was growing up, that's a girl's toy. And so I saw how we connected there.
Hmm.
Then I saw how we connected with our mother's deaths. And I
Hmm.
really connected with her on that level. And so we started exploring that in the movie. We started exploring gender,
Hmm.
in the movie. And what was it? What did you learn being a boy?
Hmm.
And it's
Hmm.
fascinating because, in the hero's journey, there's that moment where something happens and they can no longer go back to the way they were. And for her, it was passing as a boy and
Hmm.
realizing that boys have privileges in India and in the world, but in particular at that time in India that girls didn't have. And she wanted the privileges of being a boy. And it really caused problems with her family life because the girls were supposed to serve the men and her brothers in particular, and she didn't want to.
Hmm.
And at one point, they were like, "You need to serve your brothers," and she was like, "Why? The women are doing all the work. They should serve us."
She has a point.
She did. And so, I found her life, like every time something would connect, so gender was a big thing with this project. Um, are definitely, like I said, our mothers. The other thing was how political she was, because back in the 80s, when the AIDS epidemic happened, I used to be in ACT UP in Kansas City. And
Okay.
I remember being very political, and I remember going to the March on Washington in 93.
Hmm.
We didn't change anything except a million people all stood together and we got encouraged. We had courage infused into us from seeing how powerful we are as a unit. And the day that she got there for the World Record event, I went right back to that. She may not have changed any laws that day of the World
Hmm.
Record event, but the fact that they were all standing together. And I'm not going to give it away whether they get the record or not, because you actually have to pass certain tests to get the
Hmm.
record. But the fact that all those young women were standing there together was so powerful. And it's just, like when the universe starts clicking and you just start seeing all the connections with a person, you know, I that's how I got into Aparna's character. Was I came to it from the way I would do it as an actor. You know,
Hmm.
I I came to it as, well, how do I get to that? How do I get to that? Where in my life did I experience that? And then it helps me like ask her questions because
Hmm.
I've experienced it. And I think that's going back to it. I think that's where the trust came in,
Hmm.
because I would tell her these little stories. I say, this, and her and I have become really good friends. I wouldn't even say friends. I feel like she's my sister. No.
This sounds like it. Well, we're running out of time. I'm so sorry. I wish we had more time, but let that be incentive for everyone to come out on July 19th. There's going to be Q&A. John's going to be there. Our partner's going to be there. I'm going to be there. It promises to be a great event. It's for a great cause. It's a chance to get a first look at this, which sounds like a really remarkable movie. John, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today. I look forward to meeting you in person on July 19th
Thank
at
you so
five
much.
o'clock at the Mary Pickford Theater. And also, just to remind people, this is in cooperation with my film festival, the American Documentary and Animation Film Festival. Our next festival will be uh, March 27th through 31st, 2025, at the Palm Springs Cultural Center. If you're a filmmaker, we're taking submissions now. I hope you're submitting your film to our festival. Maybe we can show it again. And if you're a filmmaker, submit your film. You have till the end of the year, and just keep that date open. We're going to have a fabulous festival as we usually do. So, but again, July 19th, Mary Pickford Theater, 5 o'clock, Cathedral City. John and Aparna will be there. It's going to be Pink Belt, a very fascinating movie. You're going to learn a lot. I think you're going to be charmed by the film like today. I was charmed by John. John, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.